So this is the Mexican-made Player Series HSH Strat that I got a few days ago, hoping to replace actually the classic vibe 60 Strat that I've had for a few weeks now. I thought it might be helpful to say a few things. First off the bat, it's a fair bit heavier. This feels almost like a 3/4 size after playing the Player Strat. So the classic vibe, it's got a very thin neck profile in comparison, and I mean the body feels lighter. It is NATO wood, whereas the Player is alder. The neck is a lot thicker on the Player. It just feels kind of chunkier, but in a good way. The hardware does feel heavier as well, so the bridge, I think it's a bigger chunk, and it's also nickel chrome perhaps rather than just nickel on this, although that just might be the specs sort of misstating that. The neck on the classic vibe actually feels a lot better. The fret ends are way smoother, they have that rolled kind of feel, and the fretboard does, although you know neither of them are super high quality fretboard, the classic vibe does feel smoother because, as you know, everyone complains about the power ferro. I really like it, but you know, I can see if you're a traditionalist or sort of purist there and you're used to rosewood or maple, you may not initially like it because it looks kind of dry. I wouldn't say that it feels dry. If you see it there, it may look kind of dry to you, but I actually prefer playing this a lot more than the classic vibe, even though the fret ends are a little bit sharp on the Player Strat. Spec-wise, as I mentioned, NATO body versus alder, body finish, gloss polyester versus gloss polyurethane. I don't know too much about that. I guess you could say that the back of the neck on the Player, it feels like that it's not as thick, whereas the classic vibe, you know, it's got that thick kind of lacquer that a lot of the classic vibes have. It does show up a bit more on the maple there. You can see it quite clearly. But it also gives it like a nice tint on the headstock as well. So plus and minuses there. As mentioned, Indian Laurel fingerboard versus Power Ferro on the Player. I think I prefer the Power Ferro. The Indian Laurel, it's kind of, I don't know if it's just that there's finish on it, but it has almost like a rubbery sort of feel to it. It's still fine. I mean, I don't really care that much, but if I had to pick a favourite, it would probably be the Power Ferro on the Player Strat. Same scale length, of course. Fingerboard radius is the same. You got 22nd fret on the Player because it's, you know, not as sort of vintage oriented as the classic vibe. Narrow tall versus medium jumbo. So medium jumbo, I mean, I don't notice a huge difference between the frets on either of these, to be honest. They look similar and they feel similar, but perhaps the the narrow talls, perhaps the same height as the medium jumbos and then just narrower. Maybe that's what I'm seeing, but not a huge difference there. Bone nut on the classic vibe, synthetic bone on the Player. That's kind of weird. I don't know if it's, you know, the material or not, but I do notice when you whole tone bend on this, it will catch in the nut on the higher strings. You can hear it kind of. We just did a bend and broke the high E string, so, well, the strings were pretty old. These are still the factory strings, whereas I have replaced them on the classic vibe, but that is definite minus points for the Player. I have already been playing it a bit, but I did not expect that to happen as early. Pickups. Fender designed Alnico single coil. The middle pickup is Alnico 5 Strat single coil on the Player. This is the Player on the right hand side, by the way, on the screen. I mean, obviously it's HSH, so we're not going to really, I mean, there's not much sonic comparison we can do here. We'll compare the middle pickups though. Big point of difference is obviously the bridge. This has got the 2-screw one, which I massively prefer to the 6-point bridge on the classic vibe. I have set it up, it floats. It floats just fine, but yeah, there's really no reason to have 6 screws when you can just do the same thing with 2, for me anyway. Final difference really, or final main difference, like, yeah, so hardware finish, nickel/chrome on the Player versus just nickel on the classic vibe. 4-bolt neck, yeah, you get a gig bag with the player Strat. Other than that, the pots maybe feel slightly better on the player, but it might be in my head. The tuners feel about the same. They are different tuners, but I don't know. The quality does feel better, even though the neck isn't finished as well. It can be fixed, of course. If I do sell one, it will be the Classic Vibe, but they're different guitars. I mean, this is HSH, whereas Classic Vibe is just 3 single coils. It is nice to have a heavier body. I do find that this is a very bright guitar, partially due to the weight, partially due to the pickups being very vintage voiced. But yeah, it is quite bright, especially into the Marshall. So we'll see what happens with this. Quality of the neck joint, it's about the same on both. I mean, I haven't taken the necks off to see if it's, you know, firmly in place without the screws. Possibly a little bit worse on the player again. There's a fairly substantial gap. You can't see it, but that gap is, I don't know, it's just ugly between the body and the neck. It almost feels like the neck isn't aligned properly. You can't see it, but I can feel it, where it feels like this is actually overhanging this part of the body here. So it feels like the neck is skewed that way a little bit, as if the bolts weren't drilled straight, basically. But that may not actually be the case. I mean, it's very, very minor, but you know, it's just something that I've noticed. Sound-wise, I really like this. I like the humbucker in the neck. I just don't like that cheesy Strat neck pickup sound all the time, unless there's heaps of gain on top of it. I don't really like the kind of clean John Mayer sort of tones. But yeah, if you have any questions about either of these two, feel free to post a comment and I will be sure to get back to you.